In war, the difference between victory and disaster is often decided long before the first shot is fired, not on the battlefield, but in quiet rooms filled with maps, intelligence reports, and impossible decisions. While some generals became legends for what they did in combat, others shaped the entire course of World War II from behind the scenes. These were the men who understood that winning a war was not about a single battle, but about coordination, timing, and the ability to think several steps ahead of the enemy. Take Dwight D. Eisenhower. Unlike many battlefield commanders, Eisenhower was not known for leading charges or dramatic frontline heroics. His true strength was something far more rare, the ability to manage chaos on a global scale. As Supreme Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force, he was responsible for one of the most complex military operations in history, the invasion of Nazi-occupied France. Operation Overlord, better known as D-Day, required coordinating American, British, Canadian, and other Allied forces, all with different priorities, personalities, and political pressures. Eisenhower had to balance strong-willed commanders like Montgomery and Patton, while also maintaining trust with leaders like Churchill and Roosevelt. One mistake could have fractured the alliance or doomed the invasion. On the night before D-Day, he even prepared a resignation note, taking full responsibility in case the operation failed. That level of accountability reveals the kind of leader he was, not just a planner, but someone who understood the weight of every decision. Now contrast that with Alan Brooke, the man often described as the real strategic mind behind Britain's war effort. While Churchill is remembered for his speeches and bold vision, Brooke was the one who often had to restrain that ambition with cold, hard reality. As chief of the Imperial General Staff, he had access to nearly every major decision Britain made during the war. He opposed risky operations he believed would waste lives, including premature invasions of Western Europe before the Allies were ready. His diaries reveal constant tension with Churchill, yet also a deep understanding of the bigger picture. Brooke knew that patience, not impulsiveness, would ultimately defeat Germany. He focused on building strength, coordinating with allies, and ensuring that when the decisive moment came, Britain would be ready. Without him, many historians believe Britain could have made catastrophic strategic mistakes. On the Eastern Front, where the scale of war dwarfed everything else, Alexander Vasilevsky played a critical role in turning the tide against Nazi Germany. Unlike more famous Soviet commanders, Vasilevsky worked mostly behind the scenes, acting as one of Stalin's most trusted planners. He was instrumental in designing operations that involved millions of soldiers, thousands of tanks, and enormous logistical challenges. One of his greatest contributions was his role in planning the encirclement at Stalingrad, Operation Uranus, which trapped an entire German army. Coordinating multiple fronts in brutal winter conditions required precision and discipline. Vasilevsky understood that success on the Eastern Front was not just about courage, but about synchronization. Every movement had to align perfectly. A delay in one sector could collapse the entire plan. His ability to manage these massive operations helped transform the Red Army into a force struggling to survive, into one capable of launching devastating offensives all the way to Berlin. And then there is Gerd von Rundstedt, Germany's most senior and experienced strategist. A veteran of earlier conflicts, Rundstedt represented the old school of military thinking, calm, methodical, and deeply professional. He played a key role in early German successes, including the invasion of France, where bold operational plans shattered Allied defenses. Yet his story is also one of limits. Rundstedt often clashed with Hitler, particularly when it came to strategic decisions driven more by ideology than logic. He understood when a situation was unwinnable, famously advising withdrawal at times when Hitler demanded blind resistance. In Normandy, after the Allied landings, Rundstedt reportedly said, "Make peace, you fools," recognizing that Germany could no longer win the war. But by then, his influence was fading, and strategic decisions were increasingly dictated from above. His experience highlights a crucial truth: strategy only works when leaders are willing to listen. What connects all of these men is not a specific tactic or doctrine, but a mindset. They saw war as a system, not a series of isolated battles. They understood logistics, timing, alliances, and the human cost of every decision. While others focused on winning the next fight, they focused on winning the war itself. And perhaps that's the most important lesson. The generals who truly knew what they were doing were not always the most visible or the most celebrated, but without them, the outcomes we take for granted today might have been very different. Some generals win wars with careful planning. Others win them in the chaos of the battlefield, where decisions must be made in seconds and hesitation can mean defeat. This is where reputations are truly forged, not in conference rooms, but under fire. And few commanders mastered this brutal environment better than the men who turned impossible situations into decisive victories. Consider Erich von Manstein, widely regarded as one of the most brilliant operational minds of the war. During the invasion of France in 1940, it was Manstein who proposed the bold plan to send German armored forces through the Ardennes, a region the Allies believed was impassable for tanks. It was a risky idea, but it worked with devastating effect. German forces broke through, bypassed strong defenses, and trapped Allied armies in a massive encirclement. But Manstein's real strength was his ability to adapt. On the Eastern Front, he repeatedly stabilized collapsing lines and launched counteroffensives under extreme pressure. Even when outnumbered, he found ways to regain the initiative. His style was not reckless, it was calculated aggression based on a deep understanding of timing and enemy weakness. On the other side stood Georgy Zhukov, a commander whose name became synonymous with victory. Zhukov was not subtle, but he was incredibly effective. He played a key role in some of the most important battles of the war, including the defense of Moscow, the encirclement at Stalingrad, and the final assault on Berlin. What made Zhukov stand out was his ability to coordinate massive forces under intense pressure. He understood that on the Eastern Front, scale was everything. When the moment came, he unleashed overwhelming force with precise timing. His offensives were relentless, often pushing forward despite heavy losses. Critics argue that his methods were costly, but there is no denying the results. Zhukov consistently delivered victories when they mattered most. Then there's Konstantin Rokossovsky, a general who combined precision with patience. Unlike many Soviet commanders, Rokossovsky was known for carefully planned operations that minimized unnecessary losses while still achieving decisive results. One of his defining moments came during Operation Bagration in 1944, a massive Soviet offensive that destroyed German Army Group Center. When presenting his plan, Rokossovsky insisted on attacking along two axes instead of one, a decision that initially met resistance from Stalin himself. But he stood his ground, arguing his case with confidence. In the end, his plan was approved and it worked brilliantly, leading to one of the most devastating defeats in German military history. Rokossovsky's strength was not just in execution, but in his willingness to challenge authority when he believed he was right. Equally formidable was Ivan Konev, a commander known for his speed and aggression. Konev excelled at exploiting breakthroughs and turning small advantages into major victories. During the later stages of the war, his forces advanced rapidly across Eastern Europe, often racing against other Soviet fronts to capture key objectives. This competitive dynamic pushed commanders like Konev to act quickly and decisively. He understood that momentum was everything. Once the enemy began to collapse, you had to keep pushing, never giving them time to recover. His campaigns were marked by rapid movement, constant pressure, and a refusal to slow down. What sets these battlefield commanders apart is their ability to read the situation in real time.
Plans rarely survive first contact with the enemy, and this is where many generals fail. But these men thrived in uncertainty. They knew when to push forward, when to pull back, and when to take risks that others would avoid. They also understood something deeper, that war is not just about numbers or firepower, but about psychology. Breaking the enemy's will, creating confusion, exploiting fear, these are the invisible factors that decide battles. Whether it was Manstein's surprise maneuvers, Zhukov's overwhelming offensives, Rokossovsky's precision, or Konev's relentless pace, each of them found ways to dominate not just physically, but mentally. In the end, these were the generals who could take the chaos of war and impose their will upon it. And in a conflict as vast and brutal as World War II, that ability made all the difference.
Speed can be more powerful than firepower. In World War II, entire armies didn't just get defeated, they were outmaneuvered, outpaced, and sometimes destroyed before they even understood what was happening. This was a new kind of warfare, built on movement, coordination, and shock. And the generals who mastered it didn't just fight battles, they rewrote the rules of war. At the center of this transformation was Heinz Guderian, the man often called the father of Blitzkrieg. While others still believed in slow, methodical advances, Guderian saw the future in speed and concentration of force. Tanks were not meant to support infantry, they were meant to lead. His idea was simple but revolutionary: break through enemy lines at a single point, then drive deep into their rear, disrupting communications, supply lines, and command structures. During the invasion of France, his armored units moved so fast that even German high command struggled to keep up. At one point, he famously ignored orders to slow down, choosing instead to exploit the chaos in the enemy's defenses. The result was a collapse so sudden that Allied forces had no time to react. Guderian understood that once momentum is achieved, hesitation is the only real enemy. That same philosophy of speed and unpredictability defined Erwin Rommel. Fighting in the harsh conditions of North Africa, Rommel became legendary for his ability to strike quickly and disappear before the enemy could respond. His forces were often outnumbered and undersupplied, yet he repeatedly outmaneuvered British troops through bold flanking movements and surprise attacks. What made Rommel so dangerous was not just his tactical skill, but his instinct. He often operated far ahead of his own lines, making rapid decisions with limited information. This gave him an edge, but it also carried risks. His aggressive style sometimes stretched his supply lines to the breaking point. Still, for a time, he turned the desert into a battlefield where speed mattered more than numbers. Less well-known, but equally important, was Ewald von Kleist. Kleist commanded large armored formations during some of Germany's most critical campaigns, including the invasions of France and the Soviet Union. Unlike Rommel, who thrived on improvisation, Kleist was more methodical. He understood how to coordinate multiple units across vast distances, ensuring that breakthroughs were not just achieved, but sustained. His leadership helped transform individual tank divisions into a unified striking force capable of deep penetration into enemy territory. This level of coordination was essential because speed without control can quickly turn into chaos. Then there is Hasso von Manteuffel, a commander who took mobile warfare to another level during the later stages of the war. By this point, Germany was often on the defensive, facing overwhelming Allied strength, but Manteuffel showed that even in these conditions, maneuver could still create opportunities. During the Battle of the Bulge, he led armored units through difficult terrain with remarkable efficiency, exploiting weak points and maintaining momentum despite limited resources. He emphasized flexibility, encouraging initiative among his officers rather than rigid adherence to orders. This allowed his forces to react quickly to changing situations, a crucial advantage in fast-moving operations. What connects all of these commanders is a shared understanding that war is not static. Traditional armies relied on fixed positions and predictable movements, but these men saw the battlefield as something fluid, constantly shifting, full of opportunities for those who could move faster and think quicker than their opponents. They also understood the importance of coordination. Tanks alone were not enough. Success required close cooperation between infantry, artillery, and air support. Communication had to be constant, decisions had to be immediate, and every unit had to move as part of a larger system. When it worked, the effect was devastating. Entire fronts could collapse in days. But there was a hidden danger in this kind of warfare. Speed creates distance, not just from the enemy, but from your own supply lines. Fuel, ammunition, reinforcements. Without them, even the most successful advance can grind to a halt. And in many cases, that's exactly what happened. The same aggressive tactics that brought early victories could not always sustain long-term success. Still, for a time, these generals proved that mobility could change everything. They showed that a smaller, faster force could defeat a larger, slower one. They turned warfare into something dynamic, unpredictable, and incredibly dangerous. And perhaps most importantly, they demonstrated that in war, the side that controls the tempo often controls the outcome.
Not every great general wins by advancing. Some earn their reputation by refusing to break, by holding the line when everything is collapsing, when supplies are gone, when the enemy is stronger, and when retreat seems like the only logical option. Defensive warfare in World War II was not about standing still. It was about survival, adaptation, and knowing exactly how far you could bend before everything snapped. Few understood this better than Walter Model. Known as Hitler's firefighter, Model was constantly sent to the most critical sectors of the front, places where defeat seemed inevitable. His job was simple in theory: stop the enemy. In reality, it meant rebuilding shattered lines, reorganizing retreating troops, and creating defensive positions under extreme pressure. Model had a unique ability to read chaotic situations and impose order almost instantly. He didn't rely on elegant plans, he relied on practicality. If something worked, he used it. If it didn't, he abandoned it without hesitation. His defenses were often flexible, trading space for time, forcing the enemy to slow down and lose momentum. He understood that survival itself could be a form of victory. On the opposite side of the war, Vasily Choikov turned one of the most desperate situations imaginable into a turning point. During the Battle of Stalingrad, his forces were pushed back to the edge of the Volga River, with nowhere left to retreat. The city was reduced to ruins, and fighting took place building by building, room by room. Choikov adapted to this environment in a way that surprised even the Germans. He ordered his troops to stay as close to the enemy as possible, sometimes just meters away, so that German artillery and air power would be less effective. It was brutal, relentless combat, where survival depended on aggression as much as defense. Choikov's approach turned the battle into a grinding nightmare for the German army, ultimately buying the time needed for a massive Soviet counteroffensive. Then there is William Slim, a commander who proved that even defeat can be the foundation for future success. Early in the Burma campaign, British and Allied forces suffered a series of humiliating setbacks against the Japanese. Conditions were harsh, morale was low, and many believed the situation was hopeless. But Slim saw things differently. He focused on rebuilding his army, not just physically, but mentally. He improved training, emphasized discipline, and made sure his soldiers understood that they could fight and win. He also adapted to the environment, developing tactics suited for jungle warfare rather than relying on traditional methods. Over time, his forces transformed from a retreating army into an effective fighting force capable of launching successful offensives. Slim's greatest achievement was not a single battle, but the complete reversal of a losing campaign.
Another unique figure in defensive warfare was Kurt Student, a pioneer of airborne operations who also understood the challenges of holding ground after the initial attack. Airborne troops were often dropped deep behind enemy lines, isolated and vulnerable. Once on the ground, they had to quickly organize, secure key positions, and defend against counterattacks until reinforcements arrived. Students' experience in these operations taught him the importance of preparation and discipline. His forces had to be self-sufficient, capable of adapting to unpredictable situations with limited support. Defense, in this context, was not about strong fortifications, it was about resilience and the ability to hold on under extreme conditions. What ties all of these commanders together is their understanding that defense is not passive. It requires constant decision-making, flexibility, and a deep awareness of both your own limitations and the enemy's intentions. They knew when to hold firm and when to give ground, when to conserve strength and when to strike back. They also understood something that many overlook, that morale is just as important as firepower. Soldiers who believe they can survive will fight harder, endure longer, and resist even when the situation seems hopeless. Whether it was Model stabilizing collapsing fronts, Zhukov turning ruins into a fortress, Slim rebuilding confidence from defeat, or Student holding isolated positions, each of these men found ways to keep their forces in the fight. In the end, defensive mastery is not about avoiding defeat. It's about delaying it, shaping it, and sometimes even turning it into victory.
Some generals follow the plan, others push beyond it. They take risks, trust their instincts, and move forward when caution would say stop. In World War II, these were the commanders who often changed the pace of the war, not because they played it safe, but because they were willing to gamble when it mattered most. Few embodied this mindset more than George S. Patton. Patton believed in constant movement, relentless pressure, and aggressive action. To him, stopping meant losing momentum, and losing momentum meant giving the enemy time to recover. During the breakout from Normandy, his Third Army advanced with incredible speed across France, exploiting every weakness in the German defenses. Patton pushed his troops hard, sometimes to the limit, but he also understood how to inspire them. His presence, his confidence, and his belief in offensive warfare created an army that moved faster and fought harder than most. He didn't just react to the battlefield, he tried to dominate it through sheer force of will. In contrast, Omar Bradley represented a more measured approach to command. Known as the soldier's general, Bradley focused on minimizing unnecessary losses while still achieving his objectives. He wasn't as flashy as Patton, but his effectiveness came from balance. He understood logistics, coordination, and the importance of maintaining a steady, sustainable advance. Bradley's strength was in making the right decision at the right time, rather than the boldest one. And in a war where mistakes could cost thousands of lives, that kind of leadership was just as valuable as aggression. Then there's Albert Kesselring, a commander who proved that adaptability can be just as powerful as boldness. Kesselring fought in multiple theaters, but he is best known for his defense of Italy. Facing a strong Allied advance, he managed to slow them down far longer than expected. What made Kesselring stand out was his ability to combine defensive strategy with opportunistic counterattacks. He didn't just hold positions, he looked for moments to strike back, to disrupt enemy plans, and to regain the initiative whenever possible. Even when resources were limited, he found ways to maximize their impact. His leadership showed that risk-taking is not always about attacking, it's about knowing when to shift between defense and offense. On the other side of the world, Tomoyuki Yamashita demonstrated how speed and boldness could achieve stunning results. During the Malayan campaign, his forces advanced rapidly against British defenses, often using deception and aggressive maneuvering to create the illusion of greater strength. Despite having fewer troops, Yamashita managed to outmaneuver and outthink his opponents, leading to the Sekut of Singapore, one of the most significant British defeats of the war.
His success was built on daring decisions, rapid movement, and a deep understanding of psychological warfare. He knew how to create uncertainty and exploit it. What connects all of these commanders is their willingness to act when others hesitated. They understood that war is full of uncertainty, and waiting for perfect conditions is often the same as doing nothing. But risk comes with a cost. Push too far and you can overextend. Move too fast and you can lose control. These generals walked that line constantly, balancing boldness with awareness. They also reveal something important about leadership. There is no single way to win a war. Some rely on speed, others on caution, others on adaptability. What matters is understanding the situation and having the confidence to make a decision, even when the outcome is uncertain. In the end, these were the commanders who refused to be passive. They shaped events instead of reacting to them. And in a war defined by scale and complexity, that ability to take initiative often made all the difference.